Cole set his bag down quietly. "We can talk, you know," he said, trying to sound warmer than he felt. Lindsay scoffed, her back still turned. "About what, Cole? How great everything is." He took a deep breath, holding back the retort he wanted to give. Instead, he tried, "About us. About what's really going on." She glanced over, her blue eyes tired. "I'm just tired, okay? It's been a long day." The excuse felt practiced. Cole wanted to believe her, but the evidence of her growing distance made trust difficult. Still, he nodded. "Well, dinner smells great," he offered, forcing cheer into his voice. Lindsay said nothing, fiddling with the salt shaker. The silence between them grew, thick and uncomfortable, punctuated only by the quiet bubbling of a pot on the stove. Cole changed out of his work clothes and headed back to the kitchen, just as Lindsay set plates on the table. "I talked to Tommy today. He thinks we could land the Harrison contract," Cole said, hoping to bridge the gap with talk of their shared professional life. Lindsay forced a smile. "Good for you," she muttered, stabbing at her salad with her fork. Cole studied her. "Lindsay, is there something you want to tell me?" She shook her head, her jaw set. "Let's just eat." A heavy silence settled over dinner, unbroken until Lindsay finally excused herself, claiming a headache. Cole was left alone at the table, staring at her untouched food. He wondered how long their lives could keep running on parallel tracks before a collision became unavoidable. He was angling for Cole's position as well. The ambition Ryan displayed was more predatory than passionate. Cole suppressed a tight smile. This was no longer a personal matter, but a professional battle on two fronts. "Technology is important, but it can't replace real-world experience," Cole replied, voice even. "There are risks the board can't appreciate from a spreadsheet alone." Gerald sighed, rubbing his temples. "You know I trust you, Cole. But the board wants to see you're adaptable. Give Ryan a chance to present his ideas. Work with him, at least on the surface. For now." Cole nodded, his mind already strategizing. "Of course, Gerald. I understand." As he left the office, Cole didn't waste any time. He reviewed security logs for after-hours access, searched for digital footprints, and followed up on internal emails. Ryan had been logging late nights, often coinciding with Lindsay's unexplained absences and mysterious headaches. By noon, Cole had gathered enough circumstantial evidence to prove that Ryan was making moves both at work and at home. But circumstantial wasn't enough. He needed confirmation. His phone buzzed. It was Tommy. "Lunch at St. Louis Country Grill? Boss wants all hands." Cole glanced at the time. "I'll be there." He stowed his files, the photo of Ryan's smirking face on his monitor burning into his thoughts. Cole's next move had to be subtle, but decisive. Everything depended on it. After dinner, Cole suggested they watch a movie together, something they hadn't done in months. Lindsay hesitated, clearly torn between guilt and obligation, but finally agreed. They sat side by side on the couch, though a gap of invisible tension stretched between them. Cole played his role to perfection, attentive, gentle, even affectionate, giving no indication that he knew everything. Later, when Lindsay slipped away to text in another room, Cole quietly followed. From the hallway, he heard the muffled tone of her voice, low and sweet, as she spoke into the phone. "Of course. Tomorrow works. I can't wait either," she said, her words floating just loud enough for Cole to catch. He retreated before she could spot him, heart pounding. Not from pain, but anticipation. Information, after all, was power, and he was gathering it by the hour. That night, As Lindsay slept peacefully, Cole lay awake, running through possibilities. Ryan and Lindsay believed themselves to be clever, but they had forgotten who they were up against. For Cole Mitchell, the game had just begun, and he was more than ready. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out his own folder, placing it calmly on Gerald's desk. "I anticipated something like this might happen, so I did my own audit," Cole said, his voice unwavering. He opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets, time-stamped emails, and internal audit trails. All expense approvals from my account matched the submission logs. More interestingly, some of these so-called forged receipts were generated from an external IP address, one tied to a VPN service registered to Ryan's apartment building in St. Louis. Ryan's face paled. One of the board members leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Gerald took a deep, shaky breath, torn between his loyalty to Cole and the alleged evidence. Furthermore, Cole continued, several suppliers supposedly giving testimony were unreachable, except one, who admitted being approached by a third party to sign forged statements in exchange for cash. He looked at Ryan, gaze steady. "You're not just trying to get rid of me. You're endangering this company's reputation, undermining its integrity, and putting our clients at risk." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Ryan tried to recover, but his voice wavered. "He's just trying to turn this on me. Don't listen to him. He's desperate." Cole's calm never broke. "Check the raw data. Let your forensic accountants review everything. In the meantime, I recommend that Ryan be suspended until the investigation is complete." Gerald, clearly devastated but regaining his composure, nodded. "That's fair. We'll get to the bottom of this." As security led a stunned Ryan from the office, Cole allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The first battle was won. There were more to come, but for now, the storm had broken, and Cole stood firm in its aftermath. He wanted Lindsay to think he was wounded, that her plan had succeeded, if only for a moment. The house was eerily quiet, except for the clinking of his belongings being packed into a duffel. Each item into the bag was a calculated move, enough to convince, not enough to surrender. As he zipped up the duffel, his thoughts raced. Lindsay would arrive home expecting victory, but would find only an empty house and a short, carefully worded note on the kitchen counter. "Need time to think. Staying elsewhere tonight. Take care of yourself." Cole locked the front door behind him and waited in his car down the street, engine idling. From his vantage point, he could see the entire front drive and was hidden from any casual view. He glanced at his watch. If his calculations were right, Lindsay would be home in less than an hour, expecting celebration and relief. Instead, she'd encounter uncertainty, and perhaps, for the first time, a hint of fear. The real endgame had started, and Cole Mitchell thrived when everything was on the line. Cole leaned back in his chair, the blue glow of the monitors reflecting in his eyes. Operation Perfect Storm was underway, and his adversaries didn't even realize the battlefield had shifted. He watched as Lindsay and Ryan moved awkwardly through the kitchen, laughing too loud, oblivious to the watchful eyes documenting their every move. Each new file Marcus and his team collected would become another nail in the coffin of their plans. He clicked through folders, seeing birth certificates, education records, even minor medical issues. Each piece of intel, another weapon to be used at the right time. By sunrise, Cole had already compiled a timeline of Lindsay and Ryan's illicit meetings, mapped their favorite rendezvous points, and flagged every careless message they'd exchanged. Options presented themselves with every new detail. Would he go to Gerald and expose the full truth? Humiliate them both publicly? Or would he use quiet pressure to force them out of the company, out of the city, ending their arrogance once and for all? Cole smiled grimly to himself. For now, he would watch, gather, and wait. Because nothing panicked an enemy more than realizing they were being hunted by someone who had never lost a war. It wouldn't take much to collapse Ryan's carefully maintained facade. Cole decided to start with financial pressure, gathering documentation and corroborating evidence of overdue payments and hidden loans. He knew the right whispers to the right people in the St. Louis financial community. Investors, vendors, and even creditors could trigger a chain reaction that would ruin any chance Ryan had in the business world. But Lindsay was smarter, more guarded. Her insecurity masked as confidence, her desire to win masked as love. Cole's approach with her had to be psychological, subtle, and relentless. He compiled a detailed profile of her patterns, the way she sought validation, the emotional manipulation she used on former partners, her deep-rooted fear of public humiliation. He began drafting a letter, not to Lindsay, but to Gerald, outlining the affair, the fraudulent setup, and the plans for a hostile takeover. Every claim would be backed with irrefutable proof, each piece carefully packaged to make sure Gerald saw Lindsay's betrayal not as a daughter's rebellion, but as a calculated business threat. Cole attached enough legal documentation and surveillance images to convince even the most skeptical board member if Lindsay tried to dispute his claims. As night deepened, Cole finalized the first phase of his operation. He set everything in motion. Automated emails with evidence were scheduled, discreet calls lined up for the morning, and all surveillance footage saved securely to off-site servers. He tested every angle, anticipating Lindsay and Ryan's next 3 moves for every possible reaction. Victory wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure your opponents knew exactly who had bested them, and why they should never try again. No, you're right. I wouldn't have. But I need proof, Cole. Something concrete to show the board. Something that will make them see Lindsay for who she really is. Cole nodded, even though Gerald couldn't see him. I have it, but it's going to take some time to put everything together. In the meantime, I need you to do something for me. Anything, Gerald replied, his voice steadying. I need you to stall. Don't let Lindsay access any company records or assets. Make her wait. And most importantly, don't let her see that you're suspicious. Play along, but keep her at arm's length. Can you do that? Yes, Gerald said, determination in his voice. I can do that. Good. Because the next few days are going to be crucial. And when it's over, Lindsay and Ryan are going to wish they'd never crossed you. Cole hung up the phone, his mind already racing ahead to the next phase. He had to move quickly, but carefully. One wrong step, one miscalculation, and the entire plan could unravel. He started by drafting a response to Lindsay's divorce petition, a scathing document that refuted every accusation and turned the tables on her. He accused her of adultery, financial fraud, and conspiracy to undermine his position at Hawthorne Security. Each claim was backed by irrefutable evidence, every word carefully chosen to paint Lindsay as the manipulative, deceitful partner she truly was. He sent the document to his lawyer, instructing him to file it immediately and make sure it was served to Lindsay in person. Next, he turned his attention to Ryan. The man was already on shaky ground, his financial house of cards ready to collapse at the slightest pressure. Cole began making discreet inquiries, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of Ryan's creditors and business associates. He hinted at Ryan's involvement in the fraudulent setup at Hawthorne Security, suggested that the man's qualifications were exaggerated, and even dropped a few words about Ryan's questionable personal habits. It didn't take long for the whispers to start spreading, and soon, Ryan's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Cole watched from the shadows, his patience unyielding. He knew that the real test of his plan would come when Lindsay and Ryan realized they were trapped, when they understood that there was no escape, no way out, and that their every move had been anticipated and countered. And when that moment came, Cole would be ready. Because this wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message that would echo through the halls of Hawthorne Security and beyond, a reminder that some lines should never be crossed, and that when they were, the consequences would be swift, brutal, and unforgiving. Lindsay's voice was tense, desperate. "We need to move faster. Gerald's stalling and Cole is too quiet. It's like he knows what we're planning." Ryan's voice was shaky, his bravado fading. "We can't rush this. We need to be careful. One mistake, and we're both finished." Lindsay scoffed. "Careful? You're the one who got us into this mess. If you'd just done what I said, we wouldn't be in this position." Cole listened, his expression unchanging. They were panicking, their confidence crumbling under the pressure. Perfect. "Send me everything," Cole instructed. "I want to know every word they say, every move they make. And Danny, make sure they know they're being watched. I want them to feel the net closing in." As the surveillance feeds began streaming in, Cole started to piece together the final stages of his plan. He needed to force Lindsay and Ryan into a corner, make them desperate enough to make a mistake, but not so desperate that they'd disappear completely. He had to time this perfectly, like a hunter stalking its prey. He spent the next few hours poring over the surveillance data, mapping out their routines, identifying patterns, and finding weaknesses. He noted the times they left the room, the frequency of their calls, the subtle changes in their behavior. And he waited, patiently, coldly, for the right moment to strike. When it came, it was almost anticlimactic. A simple text message from Lindsay to Ryan, sent in a moment of weakness, a moment when she thought she was alone. "Meet me at the old warehouse district. We need to talk. Alone." Cole smiled, his eyes gleaming in the dim light of the studio apartment. The trap was set. Now, all he had to do was wait for them to walk into it. As Ryan paced the room, frantic, Lindsay's composure started to crack. She gripped her phone, scrolling desperately through messages, but every call to her lawyer, her father, or even Victor Clave went straight to voicemail. Every lifeline was suddenly out of reach. "We need to talk to Gerald," she finally blurted, her voice shaking. "We need to get ahead of this. If we show up calm, maybe we can spin it." Ryan stopped mid-stride, sweat beading on his brow. "And say what?" "Sorry, Gerald, but we want your company, and now the sky is falling." "This is your mess, Lindsay." He flinched as Lindsay hurled her phone across the bed. "Don't you dare blame me. You promised this would work, and now everything is falling apart." Cole watched in silence, letting Danny feed him every word, every gesture. Their alliance, so passionate in secrecy, was deteriorating under pressure, predictable, but still satisfying to watch. He glanced at the countdown clock he'd set on his laptop. Only 60 hours left. Next, he typed quick instructions to Marcus. Compile a report for Gerald with every detail about Lindsay and Ryan's scheme. Deliver it in person at noon. As he coordinated with his team, Cole's focus sharpened. This was the phase where most adversaries realized the rules had changed, and the old playbook was useless. It was time to let the cracks widen, to let paranoia do its part. Let the hunt begin. A plain white envelope was slipped under the door of the cheap motel room where Lindsay and Ryan had taken refuge. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed with a list of dates, times, and locations. Each entry corresponded to a meeting between Lindsay and Ryan, a phone call, a text message, even a late-night rendezvous at a seedy motel on the outskirts of the city. Every detail was meticulously documented, every indiscretion laid bare. At the bottom of the page, a single sentence. You're being watched, every move, every breath. You can't hide from us. Cole watched through the surveillance feed as Lindsay opened the envelope, her hands trembling. Ryan snatched the paper from her, his face paling as he scanned the list. "This is impossible," he muttered. How could he know all this? Lindsay's eyes were wide with fear. "He's playing with us, Ryan. He's toying with us like we're some kind of game." Ryan crumpled the paper, his voice rising. "We need to fight back. We can't just sit here and wait for him to make his next move." Lindsay shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "He's always one step ahead. We can't outthink him. We can't outmaneuver him. We're trapped." Cole smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. The fear was setting in, the realization that they were no longer in control. They were the prey, and he was the hunter, and the hunt was just beginning. He picked up his phone and dialed Danny. "It's time to turn up the heat. Let's make sure they know there's no escape." The next morning, Lindsay and Ryan woke to the sound of pounding on their motel door. Two men in suits flashed badges and demanded to speak with Ryan. The couple watched in horror as the agents led Ryan away in handcuffs, citing federal charges of financial fraud and money laundering. Lindsay was left alone, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She tried to call Ryan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried to call her father, but the call was rejected. She tried to call her lawyer, but the line was busy. She was completely isolated, completely alone. Cole watched the scene unfold through the surveillance feed, a cold smile playing on his lips. This was just the beginning of Phase 3. He picked up his phone and dialed Danny. "It's time to start the whispers. Make sure she hears them everywhere she goes." Throughout the day, Lindsay was bombarded with anonymous messages, each one designed to chip away at her sanity. Text messages from unknown numbers, voicemails left on her phone, even notes slipped under her door. Each message contained a snippet of information about Ryan's past, a detail about his crimes, a hint at his true nature. Some were true, some were exaggerated, but all were designed to plant seeds of doubt and paranoia. She received a text message. "Did you know Ryan was married before? His first wife disappeared under mysterious circumstances." A voicemail. "Ryan's not who you think he is. He's a con man, a liar, a predator. He'll use you and discard you like he's done to so many others." A note slipped under her door. "Be careful who you trust. Some people aren't what they seem. Ask Ryan about his time in prison. Ask him about the women he's hurt." Cole monitored her reactions, noting the growing fear in her eyes, the trembling of her hands, the way she jumped at every unexpected sound. He was breaking her down, piece by piece, and she didn't even know who her enemy was. But he wasn't done yet. He picked up his phone and dialed another number, this one belonging to a journalist he'd worked with in the past. "I have a story for you," he said. "A story about corruption, greed, and betrayal. It's a tale of a powerful family torn apart by lies and deceit. And it's all happening right here in St. Louis." The journalist listened intently as Cole laid out the broad strokes of the narrative he wanted to spin. A tale of a corporate heiress seduced by a charismatic con man. A tale of embezzlement and fraud. A tale of a family's legacy threatened by greed and betrayal. It was all true, but it was also carefully crafted to paint Lindsay and Ryan in the worst possible light. As the day wore on, Lindsay's world continued to crumble. She was hounded by reporters, harassed by anonymous callers, and haunted by the whispers of Ryan's past. She tried to fight back, to deny the accusations, to defend her actions, but it was no use. The narrative had been set, and the story was spinning out of control. She was trapped in a nightmare of her own making, and there was no escape. Cole watched it all unfold with a cold, detached satisfaction. This was what he did best. This was what he'd been trained to do. He was a hunter, a predator, and he was closing in on his prey. And when he was done, there would be nothing left but the wreckage of their dreams. Cole made sure Lindsay received a handwritten letter, delivered to her motel room by a courier. The paper was thick, expensive, and the handwriting was uncannily similar to her late mother's, painstakingly reproduced by one of Danny's forgers. The letter was gentle at first, filled with phrases only a loving mother would use. "I always wanted what was best for you, darling," and "Don't let pride turn you bitter when you still have a chance to make amends." But buried within the kind words was a piercing undertone. "I hope you remember what I taught you about loyalty and honesty. The world can forgive many things, but betrayal is sometimes too heavy to repair." When Lindsay opened the letter and began to read, Cole watched her on the feed as her composure washed away, replaced by a tidal wave of grief and self-doubt. She broke down sobbing, clutching the letter to her chest, the weight of her choices pressing in on all sides. Ryan, meanwhile, sat at a plastic desk, frantically searching online for legal help and plane tickets, anything to gain a sense of control. But every avenue ended in a dead end. Every attempt to call a friend or former colleague was met with silence or direct rejection. The divisions between Lindsay and Ryan widened with every waking hour. Alone, isolated, and racked by regrets, Lindsay was precisely where Cole needed her, teetering on the edge, desperate for some form of salvation or forgiveness. Cole knew the end was near. It was only a matter of time before one of them broke completely and tried to make a deal, a confession, a betrayal, an act of self-preservation. He leaned back in his chair, eyes glued to the cascading feeds, determined to see this psychological siege through to its final, inevitable conclusion. Cole replied simply, "Meet with them. Tell the truth. Let justice follow its course." He knew Gerald was torn between heartbreak and duty, but ultimately, the company and family legacy had to be protected. Truth, documented and undeniable, would do the hard work now, and Cole had made sure it would speak louder than any desperate plea. As night fell over St. Louis, Lindsay and Ryan sat separated by more than the cheap motel's faded walls. They barely looked at each other. The partnership that had started with whispered secrets and stolen glances had devolved into bitter blame and broken trust. Their resources were gone, their reputations in tatters, their bonds, financial, emotional, conspiratorial, shattered. Cole watched from his makeshift command center, every move accounted for, every variable controlled. He felt no pride in dismantling their lives, only a grim resolve that this was the price for crossing a line that should never have been approached. Tomorrow, federal agents and prosecutors would have everything they needed. Gerald would be ready, armed with the facts, and Cole would finally be able to step into the light, no longer hunted, but victorious. The end was at hand. All that was left was the reckoning. Ryan admitted that he'd manipulated Lindsay, using her insecurities and her desire for validation to control her. He'd orchestrated the affair, the fraud, and the plan to take over Hawthorne Security, all while Lindsay believed she was in love and making her own choices. He'd even staged the evidence to make it look like Lindsay was an active participant, knowing that her pride and fear of abandonment would keep her silent. Cole listened to the recording of Ryan's confession, his expression unchanging, but his mind racing. This changed everything. Lindsay had been a pawn, a tool in Ryan's game, just as Cole had suspected. But now, he had proof. And with that proof, he could offer her a choice: face the consequences of her actions and go down with Ryan, or turn on her former lover and save herself. He picked up his phone and dialed the detective handling Lindsay's case. "Detective Sean, this is Cole Mitchell. I have information that could change the course of your investigation. I think it's time we had a talk." As he waited for the detective to arrive, Cole prepared the final pieces of his plan. He had one last message to send, one last nail to drive into the coffin of Lindsay and Ryan's conspiracy. The message was delivered to Lindsay at the police station, a simple USB drive containing all the evidence of Ryan's manipulation, his lies, his crimes. Along with it was a note, handwritten in Cole's own script. "You were never a part of this, Lindsay. You were a victim, just like me. But now, you have a choice. You can go down with him, or you can fight back. The truth is on your side. Use it." Cole watched through the surveillance feed as Lindsay opened the USB drive, her eyes scanning the documents, the recordings, the irrefutable proof of Ryan's betrayal. He saw the moment when she understood, when the last of her illusions shattered, and she was left with only the cold, hard truth. And then, he saw her make her choice. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. She stood, walked to the detective's desk, and handed over the USB drive. "I want to press charges," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I want to testify against Ryan Torres. I want justice." Cole leaned back in his chair, a cold smile playing on his lips. The net had closed, the hunt was over, and justice had been served. As Gerald left, Cole sat in silence, letting the exhaustion finally settle over him. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of uneasy peace. Justice had been done, but not without cost. Lindsay would have to rebuild her life from the ground up, learning hard lessons about trust and consequence. Gerald would heal in his own time, proud but watchful, and the company would emerge stronger, wiser from the ordeal. Cole packed away the remnants of Operation Perfect Storm. Surveillance files, burner phones, and encrypted drives went back into safe storage. There would be time to grieve, to forgive, perhaps even to reconcile. But not now. Tomorrow, Cole would return to Hawthorne Security Solutions, not just as Gerald's son-in-law and partner, but as the man who had proven that no threat, internal or external, could tear down what they'd built. He knew the scars would remain, but so would the lessons. He looked out at the St. Louis night, the city lights far away and inviting, and felt the weight of war finally lift from his shoulders. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as partners, as survivors, as family. For Cole Mitchell, the hunt was over, but the future had never looked more secure. "I can't go back to the way things were, and I don't want to. She has her path, and I have mine." Gerald nodded solemnly. "I understand, Cole. I really do. I just wanted you to have some closure, if there's such a thing." He set his coffee down, gave Cole's shoulder a firm squeeze, and quietly left the office. Alone now, Cole weighed the envelope in his hand for a long moment before breaking the seal. Inside, Lindsay's handwriting was neat and measured. The letter was an apology, raw, sincere, and unflinchingly honest. She admitted her mistakes, her blindness, her need for validation, and her deep regret for hurting Cole and her father. She wrote about her awakening, how betrayal, loss, and manipulation had forced her to confront truths she'd been running from all her life. She thanked Cole for saving her, even if it had been in a way neither of them would have chosen. Cole read it all, absorbing the sorrow and hope in her words. He found that, instead of anger, he felt only a quiet acceptance. She would never be his wife again, but she might, one day, be forgiven. He placed the letter back in its envelope, filed it away, and turned his attention to the future. There were new hires to vet, new challenges to conquer, and a company and life that needed his steady, vigilant hand. Outside, St. Louis glimmered in the morning sun, hinting at new beginnings. For the first time in a long while, Cole felt ready to meet them. Cole managed a quiet, genuine smile. "That's all I ever wanted, Gerald. Thank you." Gerald nodded, his gaze warm and proud as he walked out, leaving Cole alone in the sunlit office. Cole picked up the phone, posture steady, voice calm and clear as he greeted Senator Whitfield's assistant. His mind was already sharpening for the next challenge. As the conversation about the senator's security detail unfolded, Cole gazed through the office window at the city stretching beyond. He felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. The battle was over, the wounds were healing, and the future was his to shape, unburdened by regret or unfinished business. The lesson lingered. Some betrayals demanded consequences. Some wounds never truly left scars. But mercy and resolve could still coexist. Justice, he realized, wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about ensuring the right people would thrive, safe and strong, for generations to come. And with that, Cole Mitchell set his sights forward, determined to protect what mattered, whatever storms the future might bring. Again, in the next story. Cole placed Lindsay's letter in the drawer, locked it away, and returned his gaze to the window, watching as the world moved on, ever unaware of the dangers quietly defeated in its midst. The city pulsed with hope and ambition, never knowing just how close it had come to disaster, nor how fiercely it had been defended. And so Cole Mitchell remained, not as a man haunted by the past, but as a protector, ever vigilant, ever ready, guarding the line between peace and chaos. Some storms wane, but the watch never ends.